Here's William Lane Craig to make excuses for God making himself hard to believe in.
If you don't believe there's a God, I'm just curious, what evidence do you want or do you think you would need to believe there is a God?
This is actually one of my favorite questions, most thought-provoking questions that believers can ask an atheist like me, because I genuinely don't know what would convince me.
The only way I could be convinced that there's a God is if that God were a physical entity whom I could see and touch. If the universe were created by a physical being who lived in some other universe who used physical means to create this one, I could be convinced if that being could come into this universe, or I could enter that being's universe and meet that God face to face and see what technology it used to create this universe. For as long as theists define God as some non-physical entity whose existence is independent of not only this space-time continuum, but also all of space and time, I will not be able to understand what it means for God to exist, or what evidence for such a God would look like.
Because the things that used to convince me, I have now concluded are unreliable ways of knowing or concluding a strong belief in the existence of a God. But I've found I don't know isn't a very satisfying answer to a lot of these questions for believers. What if I'm a little more provocative? I'd argue that it doesn't matter what I think. This is on God. Speaking of the Christian God specifically, the Christian God is all-knowing, knows exactly what would cause me to believe, all-loving, wants me to believe, wants me to return to live with him again in heaven, and all-powerful, can provide those things to me. It is up to God. He knows what's going to do it, he wants it to happen, and he has the ability to make it happen.
And appeal to free will makes no sense because we don't have much control over what we find convincing. But even if I did, why leave it up to me? I can understand leaving it up to human beings whether they want to worship God or not, but what is the point of making us consciously choose to believe that he even exists?
But Alan, what about free will? God just can't make you believe. That is the ultimate Christian escape hatch in this conversation. I am of the opinion that beliefs are not a choice. Beliefs are an outcome of experiences, and the outcome of a believer's experiences have led them to believe. They have concluded that God exists because of their experiences. My experiences have caused me to conclude God does not exist. If I had experiences that would change my mind, I would have no choice but to change my mind. God knows. The ultimate plan creator knows what would convince me. And yet, those experiences have not been put in my path. I have a sincere heart, a contrite spirit, and a bald head. I am ready to go wherever the truth will take me.
Another common rebuttal to arguments like this is that you do actually believe in God and are just in denial. Of course, this argument is not going to convince anyone who knows what's going on in their own mind. We know that we are not in denial. We know that we genuinely do not find the proposition that God exists to be convincing. We know that we can't simply will ourselves to believe, so this argument is not going to get apologists anywhere.
So give me those experiences, God, and I will have no choice but to believe in you.
Well, let's leave aside the suggestion that there are no good arguments for the existence of God, since I've defended those extensively.
Well, clearly whatever arguments he's heard have not been convincing to him.
I think the more interesting thing is his provocative suggestion that he doesn't have any freedom as to what he will believe. He thinks that everything he believes is determined by factors outside himself.
I think what I believe is determined by a combination of factors outside and inside myself, neither of which I can control. There are lots of things about my brain that I can't just change at will.
Now, one of the philosophical influences that has most deeply influenced me is the conviction of existentialist philosophers, from Dostoevsky to Sartre, that freedom lies at the very heart of authentic human existence.
Craig has said that he lowers his epistemic bar for Christianity because he so badly wants it to be true. For those of us who are indifferent to its truth, that's not going to be as easy as it is for him. For me, since I don't even understand what it means for a God to exist, as Craig defines God, I'm skeptical that it's even possible.
It is the essence of inauthentic human existence to allow yourself to be shaped and determined completely by external factors.
I don't allow external or internal factors to shape my beliefs. I have no control over what factors shape them.
And the existentialist philosophers believed that the mass of humanity live lives that are inauthentic. They cannot bear this dread burden of freedom.
Existentialists said that sometimes people avoid freedom by acting in bad faith. This means that instead of making up their own minds about what to do with themselves, they hand off decision-making to an ideology or a religion. It's ironic that Craig is using this concept in defense of religion.
And therefore they allow themselves to be shaped by others. They go along with the crowd. They let external influences determine what they believe and think.
And you let your wishes and feelings determine what you believe and think. I don't see why that's any more epistemically reliable.
And incredibly, I think, this fellow prefers inauthentic human existence over authentic human existence.
I didn't get that impression. He certainly didn't say that. He doesn't prefer his beliefs to be out of his control. He simply recognizes the degree to which they are.
He thinks that he has no freedom to determine what he believes, that his beliefs are determined entirely by external factors, and therefore he blames God for not determining him to believe in God. Now, I think that that is the ultimate non-Christian cop-out, because it passes the buck and blames God for your own unbelief rather than shouldering the responsibility yourself.
Please explain to me how I am supposed to believe in something I don't naturally find convincing. I know Blaise Pascal said that if you just go through the motions of believing in God, you can eventually brainwash yourself into genuinely believing, but I don't see how this could work for those of us who don't even understand what it means to say that a God exists. I don't know how to believe that a claim is true if I don't understand what it means.
And I find it just remarkable that someone would prefer to be a marionette. He would prefer to have God pull the strings and say, "Do you love me?" And then God would make the marionette say, "Yes, God, I love you," in this mechanical, determined way. Clearly, that would be a meaningless relationship.
I take the opposite view. If someone loves me, I would want them to love me because my virtues cause them to love me. If their love for me is not causally determined, then its manifestation is completely spontaneous and disconnected from anything about me. That would be meaningless. If their love for me is causally determined by my virtues, then that love would have meaning. It would mean that I have lovable virtues.
The Christian view of God and man is much higher than this.
I also don't see how whom I love or don't love is within my control. I don't know how to simply will myself to love someone who doesn't naturally provoke those feelings. If the Christian view is that I do have this ability, I'm entirely clueless as to how to wield it.
That God has given us significant moral freedom to make choices, and we are not like marionettes that are determined in everything we believe and do. Now, not only is that a much higher and exalted view of man,
I don't see how it's higher or more exalted for humans' beliefs and emotions to be spontaneous rather than caused. I don't see why spontaneous love is better than love which is caused by encountering something lovable, or why spontaneous belief is higher than belief being caused by a claim actually being convincing.
but think about what he's saying, that everything he believes is determined. What about that belief itself?
Yeah, that's determined too. I don't understand why Craig thinks this is some kind of gotcha. My beliefs are determined by claims and evidence actually being convincing, rather than erupting spontaneously. Why would uncaused belief be more reliable?
He believes in determinism simply because he's determined to believe in it. So his belief that all his beliefs are determined is not itself a belief that he has arrived at by rational reflection.
Yes, it is, because rational reflection is also a deterministic process.
It's just something he was determined to do, like a tree growing a branch or having a toothache. And so ultimately, this conviction of his that all of his beliefs are determined, and therefore he can blame God for not determining him to believe in God, is, I think, a self-defeating proposition.
Why? If a conclusion follows by logical necessity, say in a deductive argument, the reason I believe it is because I can't understand what it would mean for it to not be true. I believe that 2 plus 2 does not equal 5, not because I freely choose to believe it, but rather because I can't understand what it would mean for 2 plus 2 to equal 5. And I don't know how to believe claims that I can't understand. How does that undermine my conclusion? Why would my conclusion be more reliable if I were somehow able to understand how 2 plus 2 could equal 5?
Even his belief in determinism is just the result of determinism, and thus it destroys itself.
How? A common line that Frank Turek likes to use is that if your mind operates deterministically, you're not reasoning, you're just reacting. But it seems very much to me to be the case that reasoning is a kind of reaction. If my conclusions were not determined by the premises from which they follow by inescapable logical necessity, why would they then be more reliable? Conclusions that are reached through a non-deterministic means would, by definition, be reached for no reason. Why would such conclusions be more trustworthy?
To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.